Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti-śāstra Swamini Namine. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti-vedanta Swamini Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine. Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So welcome back to the Bhagavad Gita chapter 6 continuation. So we just dealt with 2 verses of the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So we will just recollect some of the points that we discussed. Some of you who did not come for the last class also. So 6th chapter is entitled the Dhyana Yoga, or the path by which the 8-fold yoga system is elaborated by Krishna, the system by which one can meditate on the Paramatma and then attain self-realization. So last class we discussed what is the idea of dharma, how we are in, Arjuna was in a dichotomy, he didn't know exactly what to do. So he had to he was referring to the scriptures, he was referring to his rational and trying to understand how he can handle the situation, but finally he gave up all the ideas and surrendered to Krishna, and he further began to ask questions to Krishna to understand what is the proper system that he has to follow, to whether to fight or not to fight. So the whole discussion is going on chapter by chapter. Krishna is gradually explaining to Arjuna that he has to work for him, he has to fight with proper understanding and proper knowledge. So Krishna, after having explained in the previous chapters about the principle of renunciation, how one has to work for him, again in this beginning of this chapter he is clearly stressing that one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life, and he is the true mystic, not he who lights on fire and performs no duty. So he is very clearly clarifying that someone who might have taken sannyas, and by his sannyas he might have stopped all the social activities. He might be, of course sannyas is not engaged in cooking, he might not be dealing with the fire, but by his sannyas, if he has not established his connection with the Supreme Lord, if he is not engaging in the service of the Lord, such a sannyas is not glorified by the Lord. He says that, on the other hand, one who has taken sannyas and he is engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord. And also another personality is the one is a family man. He is performing his duty, simultaneously engaged in the service of the Lord. Krishna says that you are as good as a sannyasi. And in the second verse, Krishna is pointing out what is called renunciation you should know to be the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme, O son of Pandu. For one can never become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. So again Krishna is reminding about the important principle of renunciation, the principle of renouncing the desire for sense gratification. So remember in the 3rd chapter we discussed about yogi who externally renounces but internally is dwelling on these sense objects. So Krishna calls him a mithyachari. So having explained the principle of renunciation, how one should renounce, now Krishna, after having explained the principles of karma, the principles of jnana, now he is going to elaborate another system of yoga by which one can come to the God realization, or by meditating on the Supreme as Paramatma. So now there is a question, so far the Lord is asking Arjuna that you engage, you act, you work do it as a duty, whether it is a gain or loss, or it is a pleasure or pain, whatever may be the situation, you do it as a duty, you engage in the activity. So how long this activity has to be done? So now in this verse, now he is speaking about the system of Eightfold Yoga system, the levels on it. This is text 3, beginning text 3. Arurukshor muner yogam karma karanam uchyate yogarudasya tasyaiva shamat karanam uchyate. For one who is a neophyte in the Eightfold Yoga system, work is said to be the means, and for one who is already elevated in yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. Now Krishna here is defining two levels of yoga. So one is called the Aruruksho and another one is the Yoga Ruda, Arudasya. Aruruksho and Arudasya. Aruruksho means that he is on a beginning level. So Srila Prabhupada translates it here as who has just begun yoga. The person who has just begun this process of yoga. And then Arudasya, one who has attained perfection in yoga. So these are two stages Krishna is going to explain further. And so with this one basic understanding we should have, what is the yoga should be understood clearly. So Krishna has been discussing about yoga from the beginning of the second chapter as well. So yoga generally in the modern day means that some kind of exercises. Some people have a conception that you perform yoga to reduce fat, or you perform yoga to play tennis. If you want to be a powerful tennis player, there are some gurus who suggest them to perform some yoga. Or you want to be an efficient manager, you perform yoga. There's so many ideas people have. The idea of performance of yoga, they take it in terms of keeping the body healthy so that you can comfortably engage in sense gratification. But when we study this chapter, we will understand from where they have come up with this idea. It's very difficult to conceive because it's completely motivated, completely misinterpreted. Now we can see here Srila Prabhupada, the very first line is defining what is yoga. The process of linking oneself with the Supreme is called yoga. So how do we understand? Tennis yoga, yoga for pregnancy, work-life balance, engage in yoga, all incorporates. It's a very, if you have, nowadays yoga teachers are in demand. Every corporate they call for a yoga teacher, and but none of them ever discuss this point that actually yoga means to link with the Supreme. That Supreme, that is not all there in the picture, but everything else they are trying to do. So many different kinds of yogas they teach just to keep the body fit, but the whole idea of the yoga system itself is for self-realization, not for self-gratification. Okay, Srila Prabhupada further continues. It may be compared to a ladder for attaining the topmost spiritual realization. This ladder begins from the lowest material condition of the living entity and rises up to perfect self-realization in pure spiritual life. According to various elevations, different parts of the ladder are known by different names. But all in all, the complete ladder is called yoga and may be divided into three parts, namely Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. The beginning of the ladder is called Yoga Urukshu stage and the highest rung is called Yoga Ruda. Okay. Now here Srila Prabhupada is comparing this yoga system to a ladder. So we have different steps in the ladder, and by stepping over the ladder, then you go to the destination. So by the practice of yoga, what is the destination that we would like to achieve? Self-realization, of God realization. So God, by God realization, one attains self-realization as well. That's the idea. So now there are different steps in the yoga ladder. Srila Prabhupada is pointing out. If you look here, Srila Prabhupada has divided the ladder into. He says that it could be three parts. He says Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. So if you see, and also he says that what the ladder is meant for, someone who is in the lowest material condition, from that condition he is gradually is elevated. Okay. Now, if you see in this, there is you don't find karma kanda here. You don't even find karma yoga here. But of course, elsewhere, Srila Prabhupada, he talks that karma yoga is also part of the ladder. But also, we can see from another perspective why here Srila Prabhupada has not mentioned karma yoga. One reason is that the very process of linking with the Supreme means the sense gratification, process of sense gratification should be zero. So as we discussed before, we are Buddhists in what? When we are dealing with sense gratification, zero, nothing to do with sense gratification. So in the process of jnana, so as we heard, from beginning we have been hearing, a person is already purified of his senses. A person has full control over his senses and he engages in tapasya, yoga and all those things. So here, that's one of the reasons you see here, Prabhupada is saying that from jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, bhakti yoga, then he gives the ladder. Then we will also see one quote from the lecture where Srila Prabhupada also talks about karma yoga. But then we understand also the Vedic process, rather than engaging in sinful activities to satisfy the senses, or when one is not disciplined, he may engage in whimsical activities and he may become mad for sense gratification. Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma yadindriya pritya apranoti. So this is what happens. When you don't follow the dharmic path, then you may go mad, you may go crazy simply to gratify your senses. So there is, we discussed in the 3rd chapter that is Krishna is introducing the system of that, okay, you want some material benefits, you want to gratify your senses, but do it in a bona fide way, do it in a dharmic way, okay. But still you are hovering on the platform of sense gratification. So the linking with the Supreme begins when you come to the understanding that no more I want to gratify my senses, no sense gratification at all. So then the process of, so then that is the, so you are, when you are engaged in the process of karma, there is, you have, even if you are not sufficiently purified, by the process of engaging in karma, then you gradually purify your senses, then that will lead you to the process of knowledge. So here Srila Prabhupada is quoting these 3 as the steps of the ladder, jnana, dhyana and bhakti. And so those who are in the beginning stage, is defined as yoga rurukshu. So, and those who have, by the process, who have attained the perfection is called as yoga ruda. Okay. Now, Srila Prabhupada goes on to explain about the 8-fold yoga system. Concerning the 8-fold yoga system, attempts in the beginning to enter into meditation through regulative principles of life and practice of different sitting postures, which are more or less bodily exercises, are considered fruitive material activities. All such activities lead to achieving perfect mental equilibrium to control the senses. Now, that's the point, that these rules and regulations which are meant while practicing the 8-fold yoga system, and the do's and don'ts, and then the sitting postures, all these things could be done for fruitive results as well. Okay, but these are steps which is going to take you further, as we see in the 8-fold yoga system. It begins with yama. Yama, niyama. So yama means there are certain activities which are forbidden, you are not supposed to do. You must avoid certain activities. And it is explained that one should be non-violent, one should not speak lies, one should not be possessive, one should not be possessive of the things that he has got, then one should not steal. All these things are mentioned. So these are yama. And niyama are those things which we are supposed to do. For example, what are the do's that we have to chant 16 rounds of the Hare Krishna mantra, we have to honor only prasadam, we have to associate with devotees, like that. So the scriptures also explain that one should be clean, one should be satisfied, one should engage in tapasya, one should engage in study of the scriptures, swadhyaya, one should also accept the supremacy of the Lord, that I am not the controller, the Lord is the controller. So these are all the niyamas. So these are the first 2 steps in the process of yoga. Now, which yoga teacher is teaching this? These are the first two steps. First you cross these two steps. Unfavorable things reject, favorable things accept. Unless we do this, sometimes we hear, I remember also in the corporate, sometimes some people, they hire some people because they see some directors also come for this yoga courses. So, this yoga teacher is fully aware, So, his yoga instructions will be according to the person who is coming. So, because he wants to continue his tenure in the particular company, otherwise he may lose the job. So when the director or a person in the high post comes in, no problem. Already ate, I took this, no problem. Do whatever, that's okay. You can just join us. So, but the first two steps itself is very clearly saying yama and niyama are there. You have to follow certain rules and regulations. The brahmacharya is being spoken. You have to be you cannot just engage in sense gratification in whatever way you want. So these are all some of the strict codex that we will see. Krishna is also going to explain further about the sitting postures and about the way you meditate and what kind of regulations one has to follow. But here Srila Prabhupada is hinting that in the beginning stages there is this regulation is very much required. So then after this yama and niyama, also sitting postures are there. So one has to sit erect. How one has to sit, Krishna is going to explain. How one has to sit, how one has to, where the eyes should be focused, how he should sit on what should be his posture, everything is explained. So there is asana. And then you have to do pranayama. Why you require, then the pranayama steps is controlling the breath. We already heard in the 4th chapter of how some of the yogis are engaged in controlling the life airs. So we also heard about the Kumbhaka yoga, right? By controlling the breath, one tries to extend his lifespan. So by pranayama, what is actually happening is you are controlling the breath, and by that you generate energy. You are completely fit enough to focus your mind and senses. And the next step after the pranayama is spoken about pratyahara. By pratyahara, one withdraw the senses from the sense objects. So externally you withdraw, then internally also you have to withdraw. Internally your mind should completely be away from. You cannot contemplate on any sense object. Then the next step is the dharana. Dharana is for you start the concentration. There are some numbers that is given. Number of seconds also is mentioned. That the concentration levels are for shorter duration. That you completely withdraw everything. You have withdrawn yourself from the external sense objects and you start concentrating. Then comes dhyana. Dhyana is for a prolonged period of time. Completely concentrate. That's meditation. And then from dhyana it leads to samadhi. So these are the eightfold system which Krishna is suggesting to Arjuna by this Ashtanga Yoga process. Okay, let's continue with the purport. One interesting thing I also sometimes seen, there was one in Chennai, there is one Sri Vaishnava. With due respect, I am not criticizing Sri Vaishnava or something, because he has some knowledge of scriptures and other things. He was explaining to one of his friends, that one boy was trying to play football. So he was relating these eightfold principles, okay, you have to hit the ball at the right position, you have to concentrate, you should know where are the strategic points, where are your persons. So all these things, he's speaking about pranayama also. He was saying, pranayama, you generate energy, you control your breath, all those things are there, you can focus on these things. Then I said, okay, he knows the scriptures here and there, but that's what is happening in the modern days. Use whatever is there, use it in whatever way you can make it productive, you can use it. But you can apply these principles, but point not to be forgotten, but for what? So for them, when you hit the ball, they said, I remember that you hit the ball, and then when you achieve the goal, that is success, you have done samadhi. But the point to be understood is, this whole eightfold yoga system is meant for God realization. That's the point. Okay. Let's continue. Krishna conscious practice. A Krishna conscious person, however, is situated from the beginning on the platform of meditation, because he always thinks of Krishna. And being constantly engaged in the service of Krishna is considered to have ceased all material activities. You see, so this is the difference between the mechanical process and the process of bhakti. In bhakti, right from day one, we are engaged in Krishna's service. So, are we purified completely of material desires? No. We have so many material desires, but this process is a direct process. Directly chanting the names of Krishna, engaging in his service, immediately we do it for Krishna. So it is a very powerful process. So that's Srila Prabhupada is concluding the purport, explaining that by engaging directly in Krishna's service, what's happening is that we cease ourselves from material activities. So this is the secret. Okay. Okay, let's now further to establish how the Eightfold Yoga System process is applied. Krishna is going to elaborate on the control of the mind. So here are some couple of quotes from the lectures. Krishna is asking Arjuna, Tasmad yogi bhavarjuna. My dear Arjuna, become a yogi, but at the same time, he is asking him to fight. Now we know the yogi sits down at a place and meditates and concentrates his mind and controls his senses. How can he fight at the same time? This is the mystery of Bhagavad Gita. You can remain a fighting man and at the same time be the highest yogi or the highest sannyasi. In Krishna consciousness, you have to fight for Krishna. If you fight for Krishna, if you work for Krishna, if you eat for Krishna, if you sleep for Krishna, if you do everything for Krishna, then you are a yogi, you are a sannyasi, and you are everything. Okay. So this is the quote I wanted to share with you. Similarly, in the Bhagavad Gita, you will find Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. It is stated with the name Yoga because the whole Yoga ladder is connected with the topmost floor. So every system is connected with God, Krishna. But that does not mean every man is on the topmost floor. One who is on the topmost floor, he is to be understood in Krishna consciousness. Others, they are just like 5th or 50th or 500, like that. The whole thing is called ladder. So this is the whole point that we discussed. That is the different systems are compared to the steps in the ladder, and gradually as one gets purified and one gets advanced, he makes further progress. So everything, when we study the 10th chapter, we will see Srila Prabhupada gives some more definitions of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. So how he explains that how these are everything, ultimately all the yoga systems should culminate in Bhakti, should culminate in devotion. So that is the point that Srila Prabhupada is pointing out, explaining here. Okay, now let's move to text 4. In order to achieve the status of the higher status in the yoga levels, Krishna is going to speak about the control of the mind. So, and also we will see the characteristics of the person who has attained the level of Ruda, Yoga Ruda stage. I mean, who has attained the perfectional stage, because in that stage he has controlled his mind is under his grip, senses, mind, everything is under his control. Now Krishna is also defining in this verse about that. Yada hinendriyarteshu na karmasvanusajjate sarva sankalpa sannyasi yoga rudastadochyate. A person is said to be elevated in yoga when having renounced all material desires. He neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. When a person is fully engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, he is pleased in himself and thus he is no longer engaged in sense gratification or in fruitive activities. Otherwise, one must be engaged in sense gratification, since one cannot live without engagement. So this is the point which right from the beginning we are hearing. The whole idea of any process, any spiritual process, one has to control his senses and the mind. So nothing happens without that. That's why we see in Nectar of Instruction, with a series of verses, Srila Rupa Goswami begins his instructions with the control of the senses and the mind. Without the control of the senses and mind, one cannot call himself a spiritual person. Rather, he gives a definition of a person who can be a spiritual master and who can accept disciples all over the world. One who can control the senses of the urges of the mind, urges of the tongue, urges of the belly, and in that way, by controlling all the senses, he becomes qualified to become a spiritual master. Okay. So Srila Prabhupada here, that's why he is very clearly pointing out, without Krishna consciousness, one must be always seeking self-centered or extended selfish activities. But a Krishna conscious person can do everything for the satisfaction of Krishna and thereby be perfectly detached from sense gratification. Sometimes we see people, they say, actually I am not doing anything for myself. You see, it's all for those two kids, you know, or they show their relatives. For me, I'm not interested. Why I should work? I don't need. Like, I'm just worried what will happen to him in the future. So for that I have this bank balance. For that I have some 3-4 lands and this and so many things they start to explain. And they think that they are completely. So this is the point Srila Prabhupada is explaining here. Unless you become Krishna conscious, you are always self-centered or extended selfish activities. That's all. So different people are in different levels. Someone will be very much attached to his family members. Another person may not be so much attached to family members. He will be very much attached to the local village. You know, he is always interested to see the upliftment of the local village and facilities and like that. Another fellow will be very much for the state, and then another person will be always thinking about his country. So everyone is in different levels, but everyone is attached. Unless one is attached to Krishna, he will be attached to something else. So that's the nature of the human being. So Srila Prabhupada is pointing out that one has to detach oneself from sense gratification, and that happens by attachment to Krishna. So this is the process of bhakti. So in the mechanical process, directly we are taking some steps to withdraw the senses from the sense objects. But in the process of Krishna consciousness, what happens? We engage in the service of the Lord, and by engaging in the service of the Lord and by ourselves absorbing in the service of the Lord, naturally we become detached. So that's the secret of Krishna consciousness. By the higher taste, we give the lower taste. Okay. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport. One who has no such realization must mechanically try to escape material desires before being elevated to the top rung of the yoga ladder. So what kind of realization? That realization is self-gratification is detrimental to me. It will not help me in any way. These fruitive activities are not good for me because it will bind me. So if he has not got a realization, mechanically he has to engage in some process so that he can withdraw his senses from sense objects. That's why there are some practitioners who do not engage in any activity. So that's why they completely withdraw themselves from the external world. Well, that is also there, that principle is also there. But a devotee is also withdrawn from the external world. Although he is in the midst of the community, he is in the midst of so many people, but he is withdrawn because his activities are for Krishna. So people cannot understand that. That's why they question, what is this? You are driving a car, you are using computer, you are there with all the other public, everything is happening. What is this? They can't understand that we are doing this simply for Krishna. And devotee is has a clear understanding of this. Anytime he may withdraw from anything, because if he thinks that this particular, let's say, machine or gadget or whatever is not required for Krishna's service, he is withdrawn from it. This is the understanding of a devotee. Or if it is required, he will use it in Krishna's service. But general people are not able to understand this principle of Yukta Vairagya. They think that one should be completely withdrawn from all the other belongings to this material world. One should be totally withdrawn. That's the idea they're thinking. So for doing that, so that's the whole process of this neti, that one has to follow the tough process of trying to eliminate the objects in this world and try to find the absolute truth. Okay, text 5. Now, from now on, Krishna is going to speak about how to withdraw oneself from the sense objects using the mind. Text 5. Uddaret atman atmanam natmanam avasadayet atmaiva yatmano bandhur atmaiva ripuratmanah. One must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. So, the Supreme Lord has introduced these ideas right in the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. That's why it's called as the contents of the Gita summarized. So, he knew how one has to control his senses and the mind to make progress. So, Krishna gives instruction in the section of Sthita Prajna. So he is speaking how a Sthita Prajna should sit, how he should walk, how he should talk, all those reasons Krishna is explaining. So while explaining that, say in 3-4 verses, Krishna gives the entire picture of how the senses and the mind should be controlled. If the senses and the mind, if it is not controlled, what will be the result of it? So Krishna is pointing out how one has to withdraw his senses from the sense objects. So he gives the analogy of the tortoise. How the tortoise immediately withdraws its senses, it goes into the shell when it is going to be attacked by its enemy. So it immediately identifies and withdraws its senses. Then Krishna also explains that better you fix your consciousness on me. Mat paraha says, by fixing your consciousness on me and by engaging in my service, you will not be carried away by the allurements of that the sense objects offer you. And after having explained all these things, what Krishna does, he gives warning. Okay, if you do not control your senses and mind, what's going to happen? So in 2 verses, he sums up the effect of the sense objects which has the connection with the senses, how it can ruin our life. So Krishna says, Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsa Sangasteshu Pajayate Sangat Sanjayate Kama Krodho Vijayate. So you contemplate on the sense objects and you start to develop desire for it, and then from desire you want to acquire it, and when you acquire it, do you get satisfied? No. You get more desire, you become more greedy to attain that. And when there is an obstacle, you are not able to attain the particular sense object, then what happens? You become frustrated, you become angry. Krodhat bhavati sammoha, sammohat smriti vibhramaha, smriti bhramshat buddhinashu, buddhinashat pranashati. Then there is a great havoc that is created by not controlling the senses. You become angry, and because of angry, then you lose your composure, you lose your power of discrimination, you are not able to see things in proper perspective, memory is lost, intelligence is lost, and you do not know what you are doing. Totally you are lost. That's why we see in the modern age there are so many problems we see, we just open the newspaper, every day we see some such a abominable news, you don't even want to read it. Someone takes whatever that they get in hand, they throw it, the shooting is happening, there is rape, violence, inter-religious, inter-caste fight. So many problems are happening. If they can be a little thoughtful, because they have lost composure of the mind, they have lost composure of the senses. The whole philosophical understanding of this world itself is a mess. So everything is geared towards sense gratification. So there is a big problem in the society. So many other issues, and also in the modern days we have problems of hypertension, depression, so many problems. People are taking pills. So these are all the problems because of lack of knowledge of actually our exact position in this material world. We do not even know. The basic teaching the Lord gives. We are not this body. We are a spirit soul. This body is made up of panchabhuta, and there is a physical body there. Then there is a subtle body of mind, intelligence, and ego. Then there is a presence of the soul. So this has to be studied. People go on and study so many things. They are undergraduate, postgraduate, then they get doctorate, but they do not know the basic knowledge about what is our existence, why we are here in this material world. They do not know, and they do not know the intricacies of the mind, how the mind works, how the senses are pulling us. They are simply carried away by the waves of sense gratification. So this is the problem. And so Krishna here very mercifully is giving us the understanding that one should deliver oneself with the mind. Uddharet atmanatman. With the mind you can deliver oneself, and if you do not know exactly how the mind is responding, then with the same mind you may degrade. You may natmanam avasadayat. So this is what happens. So Krishna is suggesting that keep the mind as your friend. If you keep the mind as your friend, then the mind will listen to you and then you can make progress. Otherwise, the same mind will act as your enemy. So this has to be understood. Then another point also, how this control of the mind can happen. So that has to be understood. That how it is, by what process it can happen. This also we have so far discussed, we have heard in the previous chapters as well. So let us discuss about that, and we will just get into the purport and then see what Srila Prabhupada points out here. The word Atma denotes body, mind and soul, depending upon different circumstances. So here you can see The word Atma is used, sometimes it can refer to the mind, sometimes it can refer to the soul, and it can sometimes refer to the body as well. So here Srila Prabhupada is pointing out the purpose of the yoga system is to control the mind and to draw it away from attachment to sense objects. So this is the whole idea. Here Srila Prabhupada is pointing out, in fact the pure soul is entangled in the material world because the mind is involved with the false ego which desires to lord it over material nature. Therefore the mind should be trained so that it will not be attracted by the glitter of material nature. And in this way the conditioned soul may be saved. So the conditioned soul has to be saved, so mind has to be controlled. And how the mind can be controlled? What is the way the mind can be controlled? How it can happen? So far from whatever that we have heard, any thoughts on this? How the mind can be controlled? Divert the mind, okay. You can divert the mind into what? Hearing some, meditating on the clapping of a single hand. That is also some people try to control the mind like that. Higher things, okay, as Krishna is suggesting about, you can taste, by higher taste one can control. By mantras, yes, that's a good point. Prabhupada points out that by mantras one can control. Even mantras, you get the mantras, but sometimes even with just by getting the mantras also you cannot control. You get the mantras, you cannot control. There is one key, of course Srila Prabhupada is not discussing about this point, but it's a whole picture we could see. Even it's a good point you said that by chanting some mantras you can control. But even by chanting mantras can be controlled, how one has to get the mantra from the proper source. And one has to understand the purpose of the mantra, one has to understand the meaning of the mantra, what the mantra can do. So the point that I am trying to come here is, one has to surrender to a guru, under the guidance of a guru. If you follow all those instructions as whatever you say, one has to divert the mind, one has to neglect the mind, one has to develop a higher taste, you have to get instructions from the spiritual master. So that's why if you see, when one is initiated, he is initiated with what? When someone is, now I'm going to get Diksha. So what is initiated with? What the Guru gives. Or the Guru gives mantra. And also we can understand, Chakudal Dinoje Janme Janme Prabhu say. We are in ignorance. And from ignorance, the Guru gives what? Transcendental knowledge. So if you see one of the definitions, it is explained that Divyam Jnanam Yato Dhabya Kuryat Papasya Sankshayam. So what the Guru does is, he gives transcendental knowledge, he gives mantras, he gives do's and don'ts. These are the things you should do, these are the things you don't do. All these things are meant to control our mind. That's the whole process of Krishna consciousness. That's why we have a very safe and perfect process. So that's what it is explained. Tasmad diksheti sa prokta desika is tattva kovidahi. All the pandits, this is what they call it as diksha. So diksha means not that it's just some rituals are happening. Yes, rituals are also there. Yajna is performed and all big function is there. But what is the key factor in that? Guru is giving you, we are trained into the system of transcendental knowledge. So by knowledge we hear, we contemplate, we try to understand, we surrender our lives. Then the mind can be relieved from the bondage of material existence. So this is what. Then also, so that's why we hear, always we say, come and hear, read Srila Prabhupada's books, try to understand what is in philosophy presented, then practice it. So that's why we discuss the point, no? Just the holy name alone can relieve one from conditioning, isn't it? Just chant the holy names of Krishna, you don't need anybody else. Just the holy. But then in the chanting of the holy name, there are several offenses. If you do not know what are those offenses, we may continue to chant Hare Krishna, we will be chanting Hare Krishna for several lifetimes. So this is the whole point to be understood. Now Srila Prabhupada is again giving here a point, quoting from the scripture, Mana eva manushyanam karanam bhanda mokshaya bhandaya vishaya sango Muktyai nirvishayam manaha. For man, mind is the cause of bondage and mind is the cause of liberation. Mind absorbed in sense objects is the cause of bondage and mind detached from the sense object is the cause of liberation. So this is the point. So Srila Prabhupada is giving a reference from Amrita Bindu Upanishad. He is pointing out that it's all, the whole spiritual life, it has all got to do with the mind. You have to engage your mind properly. So therefore, the mind which is always engaged in Krishna consciousness, is the cause of supreme liberation. So that is the whole point. So mind has to be engaged properly. Then mind has to get profound instructions, spiritual instructions. And by knowing the glory of Krishna consciousness, the practice of Krishna consciousness, then one will come out of the slumber state, from the state of being in ignorance, sleeping in ignorance, one will wake up. So that is why this hearing is so important. Only when we hear properly, we will be able to see things properly. Unless we hear properly, it's very difficult to understand about our situation. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabunoi Shravanadi Shuddhe Chitte Karoyudhoi. So it is explained that the love of God is hidden in our heart. But then by the process of Krishna consciousness, it has to be churned. It has to be brought out by, how it happens? By proper hearing. Hearing from a bona fide source. Regularly hearing, regularly trying to follow the instructions that we hear and chanting the names of the Lord. So both go hand in hand. So by that process we will be able to develop love for Krishna. So the ecstasy is there in hearing. Ecstatic hearing process will lead to engage us in ecstatic process of chanting the names of Krishna, and we will develop love for the Lord. So this is the whole thing. So we have to conquer the mind, and the mind can be conquered by this perfect process. Okay. Now let's go to the next verse. Again, Krishna is pointing out in the text 6 that how the mind can be one's friend and the mind can be one's enemy. Bandhuratmatmanastasya yenatmaivatmana jitah anatmanastu shatrutve vartetatmaiva shatruvat. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends, but for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. Unless the mind is controlled, the practice of yoga is simply a waste of time. One who cannot control his mind lives always with the greatest enemy, and thus his life and its mission are spoiled. See, this is the whole point, So if by practice of yoga, if you have not been taught to control the mind, if you have not been taught to restrain your senses and sense objects, you are really in a very troubled state. Can you imagine that keeping our enemy right with us, that we heard in the 3rd chapter of the Gita, where the lust is sitting. It's not that it is sitting some 1,000 kilometers far away. Right there in the mind, in the intelligence, in the 9 gates, everywhere the lust is sitting, and then it's trying to go and attack us. So we should be aware of the danger that we are into. So unless we have this knowledge, we think that we are in a very comfortable situation. Anytime our mind can trick us, anytime our mind can completely make us do some crazy things. So never we should trust the mind, and never we should take it very light. So that is why you can see the more the devotee is advanced, the more the devotee is engaged, all the time engaged in Krishna's service. Either he is chanting the names of Krishna, is reading about Krishna, or is cooking for Krishna, or is worshipping for Krishna, or is engaged in making some garlands for Krishna. Something or other, we have to keep engaging in Krishna's service. Great fortune we have. We have a very powerful, positive process of engaging in Krishna's service. Like the other day we heard, there are many people that do not know how to engage the mind. They have no clue how the mind can be engaged in proper service. Sometimes you hear this story, the story of this Aladdin and the jinn. Maybe some of you might have heard this. There was one fellow by name Aladdin. He got a lamp, and then from this lamp, a jinn is some kind of a mystic, kind of a little monster. I would say he was a very big. He had a big sword in his hand, and he said that I can just master you. Tell me whatever you tell me, I will just follow. You give me any task, I am ready to follow your instructions. But one condition, please always engage me. If you do not know, and if you want me again to go back into this lamp, then I can do that only after killing you. So he says, I'll cut you with the sword, then only I can go back into the lamp. So you please keep me always engaged. So the king, this fellow was quite furious, was wondering, okay, so he just first of all gave him some heavy task. He said that, okay, now we have a place, you go and then make our entire city, put all the roads from this corner to the other corner, all the roads should be there, nice trees should be planted, everything should be very green and perform all these activities. So this fellow went, just everything, he finished it in 1 minute and then he came back, my dear sir, I completed everything is done, tell me what's my next task. And then he was with a sword, he's just sharpening the sword. So then, okay, the king, what is this? So quickly he came. So then he just sent him. He sent him and then he gave him another big set of tasks. He said that, okay, you see, a palace is there, palace is not completed, so much construction work to be done. You finish, make the palace really glittering and looks very good, extend all those walls there, put some extra buildings. So he went, finished that in 30 seconds and he came back. So every time he gave him a task, every time he came back, said, I'm done, now please, what should I do? So this king was really wondering what to do now. I'm in trouble. I don't know what shall I do. So he consulted his minister. He had a Brahmana. He consulted his minister. Then, of course, there is some story which that was there in some fairy tale or whatever. Devotee has a version for it. So he said that, okay, Brahmana was intelligent. He told him, okay, here is a way. My dear sir, I'm a representative of the king. I have a job for you to do. You please chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra until you come to know about all the glories of the Lord. You come to the end of the glories. You cannot come to the end of the glories of the Lord because the Lord's glories is unlimited, and in this way he handled him. So the point that Maharaj Sohotra Maharaj was making was that he made an interesting point that, so mind has to be engaged, otherwise his mind is going to kill us, it's going to ruin us, we are going to be in trouble. Never, idle mind is devil's workshop. So we know about it. But and we know, because we are practicing sadhakas, we know if we are not engaged in Krishna's service, how mental we can be. We just sit, that some of us, we sit and then we look at the corner, we look at the corner and try to find some light from there. Completely mental, the devotee comes and calls you for some service, he doesn't want to move out of the place, just sits and then looks at it. When somebody sits and looks at it for a long time, you can understand he is completely mental. He has to push the temple commander or the senior devotee is very merciful. He comes and then forcefully drags him and then engages him in service. And after engage, sometimes we need, for the senses we need heavy work. And then gradually we come out of these lower modes. And when we do the service for Krishna, it is so powerful. So this has to be understood. So Srila Prabhupada is pointing out, unless the mind is favorably engaged, the same fellow is going to ruin us, is going to kill us. So that should be understood. So Srila Prabhupada is pointing out here, as long as one's mind remains unconquered enemy, one has to serve the dictations of lust, anger, awareness, illusion, etc. So that's the point. For so many millions and millions of lifetimes, we have satisfied our tongue, we have satisfied our belly, we have satisfied our genitals, we have satisfied all our senses. We are satisfied. We have gone through all kinds of relationships, being a mother-in-law, father-in-law, husband, wife, son-in-law, uncle, aunt. And in various bodies, we have 84 lakh species of bodies. In the 84 lakh species of bodies, all kinds of relationships we have engaged with, and we have tasted various kinds of sense gratification due to our uncontrolled mind. So this one lifetime, if we get this transcendental knowledge and if we understand, we have to engage in Krishna's service. Then we can control our mind. So this is the point. Now Srila Prabhupada here, he makes another interesting point, that he says that, but when the mind is conquered, one voluntarily agrees to abide by the dictation of the personality of Godhead, who is situated within the heart of everyone as Paramatma. So, what is it is being shown here is the person who is in the Yoga Ruda stage, who has attained the topmost stage of yoga. That means what? He is in touch with Paramatma. He is directly under the guidance of Paramatma. He gets dictation from the Supreme Lord. That's what Prabhupada is pointing out. Real yoga practice entails meeting the Paramatma within the heart and then following his dictation. Sometimes people say that I am hearing the voice. Be watchful what voice you hear. Maybe you are hearing the voice of the ghost, okay? But if you hear some internal voice, and if that voice directs you to serve more, to chant more, then that is the voice of the Paramatma. But if you get some other instruction, go away from devotees, better watch movies, read some latest news on the sports on the internet. These are all the voices of Maya. So these are the demoniac voice. Better you immediately come out of this mental cloud. You just immediately loudly chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. So this powerful sound vibration can help us to come out of sleepy state as well. When we are in Maya, Maya puts us in sleepy state as well. So by the yoga practice, when we hear about Krishna and when we control our senses and mind, engaging positively in Krishna's service, then we hear from Paramatma. So that is another indication here of a person who is in the Yoga Rudha stage. And Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport with the point, for one who takes to Krishna consciousness directly, perfect surrender to the dictation of the Lord follows automatically. So by following the process of Krishna consciousness, what happens, the more he is controlling his senses and mind and engaging in Krishna's service with patience, with determination, with enthusiasm, then the more he becomes advanced, the more he will hear from the Supreme Lord. So that's why sometimes, we see our spiritual master is with us, and after some time, our spiritual master may not be in our presence, okay? We may be serving somewhere or we may be alone. Then how do we know what to do, what not to do? We have guidance of the scriptures. We have guidance of sadhus. Guru Bhakti-śāstra is there. But sometimes we may be in a situation where we may have to take a decision based on whatever that we have heard, whatever that we have learned. So the more we are pure, the more we are in touch with Guru, Sadhu and Shastra, following instructions properly, we will be guided from within also. Of course, all the time, to take a decision, we do consult, we are not doing anything independently. But the point is that there are certain situations where we have to take a decision, we have to on the spot take a decision, we have to act. And our decisions will be proper to the extent we are sincere in our practice of devotional service. Krishna also gives guidance. Sometimes we will be able to give proper answers, we will be able to guide someone properly. So to the degree we are pure, to that degree we will be able to give guidance. So here we can see, Prabhupada is pointing out, so the more a devotee is advanced, he is in touch with Paramatma. Okay, let's now continue. Now, in this purport, Prabhupada is giving a hint of how one is in touch with Paramatma. Now there are further 3 more verses which speaks about the person who has attained that stage of Yoga Rudha. Now, here he says that the importance of controlling the mind. In the last 2 verses we saw how the mind has to be one's friend. If you don't control the mind becomes one's enemy. Now, if one is in this situation, who has controlled the mind is in the favorable disposal of this devotee or of the yoga practitioner, then what is the stage he has attained? That is being discussed in this verse. Jitatmanah prashantasya paramatma samahitah shitoshna sukha dukeshu tatamana pamanayoho. For one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. So Krishna says, Jitatmanah prashantasya. Jita atmanah, one who has conquered the mind, prashantasya. Then what happened? He is happy. Shanta, prashanta. He is very peaceful, he is very happy. And what else has happened? Because this is happening because of Paramatma Samahita. He is in communion with the Paramatma. He is in touch with the Paramatma. And then as a result of it, he is able to handle the winter and the summer. He is able to manage happiness and distress, and he is able to be equipoised. Honor and dishonor he is able to see. Okay. Now, okay, Srila Prabhupada, the purport is pointing out, one has to abide by the superior dictation. When one's mind is fixed on the superior nature, he has no alternative but to follow the dictation of the Supreme. The mind must admit some superior dictation and follow it. The effect of controlling the mind is that one automatically follows the dictation of the Paramatma or Super Soul. So in that advanced stage, what happens? One is in touch with the Paramatma, he is following the dictates of Paramatma. Now we can see also in 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam Pratyaksha Vagamam Dharmyam Susukam Kartum Avyayam. In this verse, Krishna says that he speaks, in Srila Prabhupada's translation, if you see, he says direct perception. He says, Pavitra Pratyaksha Vagamam Dharmyam, using direct perception. What does a direct perception means? How he has got this direct perception? That means that this is the point that Prabhupada is also pointing out here. One gets a superior dictation. One is able to hear from the Paramatma. He is able to, because having conquered his senses and mind, he is able to, he is fully focused. He is able to hear from the Lord and then follows the dictations of the Lord. So he is hearing from within and he is surcharged. His intelligence is awakened. In this situation, what happens? Krishna also gives his guidance. Krishna, he completely removes all the ignorance. In the Chaturshloki Gita, in the last two verses, Krishna says, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadhami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayantite. Krishna says that to whom he gives intelligence to those who are sincerely endeavoring to please the Lord. This is the whole point. Also in the 5th chapter, when we were discussing, we heard about so many different qualities of an advanced person. So also Krishna is hinting, yes, these qualities are the qualities of an advanced devotee. It may, when we look at it, it may appear, oh, how can you be so equipoised, or some very shocking event happens. In that shocking event also, a devotee is very cool, he understands it as the arrangement of the Lord and he does act upon it, but his response is he is not so agitated or completely disturbed by the situation. And then when you hear it, my God, what is this? Who can be in this level? But then Krishna is giving instruction that for one who is sincerely enduring in this path of yoga, the process of devotional service, one will be able to be in that state. So similarly, Krishna says, I give intelligence for those sincere seekers who simply out of love engage in my service. So now there is another question that may be raised, that Prabhuji, I am doing service, but where is the question of love? There is no love, I am just doing it mechanically. But then one point is there, if we abide by the instructions of the spiritual master, if we, what is the whole definition of pure devotion? That without any motive, without for selfish interest, we should, for the pleasure of the Lord, we should engage in His service. So this is the definition of ahaituki apratihata. This is the definition of pure devotional service. Now, we may not be on the level of bhav or prem, but if we have the faith that this process of Krishna consciousness is a powerful process, is a bona fide process, it is a process given by the acharyas, and if I stick to this process and if I don't expect what do I get from it, like Prahlad Maharaj, Dhruva Maharaj, after they attain perfection, how their attitude simply to please the Lord. So then one will be, the Lord will also to such a person give him all the intelligence and he will show the path how he can come to him. Then what Krishna does, personally he removes all the ignorance from the heart of such a devotee. Tesham evavakam partam aham ajnanajam tamah nashayam atma bhavasto jnana deepena bhasvata. So the Lord, with the torchlight of knowledge, or with the light, he completely removes all the ignorance. You see, this is the effect of practice of pure devotion. So yes, I am having thousands of material desires, but I am sticking to the process of pure devotion. So eventually, by the mercy of the Lord, we will be able to cross over it. We will many times repeat this point again and again in the class, because our very tendency in this material world is we are all very weak-minded people. So for every small incident we just break down, but we should have hope against hope, asha bandha. This is the whole point. So we should have hope against hope and then continue with our process of Krishna consciousness. So this is the whole point, that we should continuously engage in the Lord's service, and the Lord definitely reciprocates. The Lord is a person, He takes care of His devotee. And then we can see how the Lord reciprocated with His devotees. And from seeing the lives of the great devotees, we should derive inspiration and we should continue with our Krishna consciousness. Okay, now let's go to the next verse. I'll just read the concluding point of this purport. Because this transcendental position is at once achieved by one who is in Krishna consciousness, The devotee of the Lord is unaffected by the dualities of material existence, namely distress and happiness, cold and heat, and this state is practically samadhi or absorption in the Supreme. So this is the whole thing. And when one is attained the stage of samadhi, he completely becomes undisturbed. Okay, now we go to text 8. Further qualities are explained here of the Yoga Ruda person. Jnana Vijnana Triptatma Kutasto Vijitendriyah Yukta Yityuchyate Yogi Samaloshrashmakan Kanchanaha. A person is said to be established in self-realization and is called a yogi or a mystic when he is fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it is pebbles, stones or gold, as the same. So now we can see the great quality of the advanced devotee, how he can look at pebbles, stones and gold equally. Yeah, some of the devotees are laughing. Yeah, it's difficult for us, how is it possible? Stone is a stone, pebble is a pebble and gold is gold, But this is because of the, as we had a higher taste the devotee has developed, he doesn't have interest in it. Then once, I think one devotee or one well-wisher, he brought to Srila Prabhupada so many thousands and thousands of dollars worth of some ornament. He came and then he was in that business, I guess. So he came and then he put for Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was wearing it for some 10 minutes or whatever, and then so simply to satisfy this devotee. And then after that, Prabhupada was so detached, he just gave it. Okay, you take it. Many times we can see, many offerings. Srila Prabhupada gets several offerings. Sometimes he gets, some nice bracelets. He gets some ring. You can see him wearing it for some time, and then immediately wherever he travels, wherever he goes, he will call some disciples. He will call. There will be a darshan. He will be talking to them, and then he will call them, and then he will just give it to them. He was so detached. So that is being explained here. Because of being so self-controlled and being in transcendence, he is able to be in this great quality. Now there is another point to be understood here. Here it is explained about Krishna is pointing out jnana and vijnana, acquired knowledge, and vijnana is realized knowledge. So two points are explained here. So a person is said to be in self-realization. So by the realized knowledge, he is in advanced state. Now let's see what Srila Prabhupada is offering in the purport. Book knowledge without realization of the supreme truth is useless. This is stated as follows. So this is a good warning for us. Simply we read and we do not understand why these teachings are given. So that's why sometimes Srila Prabhupada also points out armchair speculators. Heard this many times in the lecture. Srila Prabhupada used to say armchair speculators are those who sit in the chair and then they read, they do several analysis of whatever text is there. And then they just sit in the chair and then they just move around left, right and center, and it's just some piece of information for them. So that's why when the scholars study this scriptural text, after all it's just, they do word jugglery, they do all this analysis, chronologically they will explain many things, but they do not know what's the real purpose of it. They do not know that actually Krishna is a person, like we discussed in the previous chapters, how they completely misinterpret, misunderstand, they miss the whole point. Even if you see, there may be many times, you can see sometimes some scholars do several analysis, they miss the whole point. It's ultimately Krishna, He is the Supreme Lord, we are all His eternal servants, we are meant to please Him. They don't take it. They may do analysis of Puranas, they may do analysis of Ramayana and several scriptures, but they don't have any faith at all. And in fact, they get lost in some particular word, in nuances, so much they will do analysis, grammatical analysis, why it is in this particular, why this particular tense is used, why, but the whole point, everything is totally lost. In fact, we can say, Shabda Jhala Maharanyam, Kevala Chitta Brahmanam. This is also there, when somebody is so much absorbed in deep study, one should keep track, actually study, and this whole, this is actually enhancing our devotion to Krishna. by studying the scriptures, we become our attitude, the seva bhav, that we have to engage in the devotional service of the Lord, we have to please the Lord. This whole Shravanam Kirtanam is for the pleasure of the Lord. One can completely get carried away. So Prabhupada here points out that book knowledge without realization of the supreme truth is useless. So that's why we can see, even some people maybe could be, folio pandits or Veda-based pandits also. Anything you ask, immediately we can do a search in a Veda-base, try to find out what is this. Sometimes you may get different quotes. Unless someone is advanced and he has not heard in parampara, he has not seen how it is being applied, you may totally misquote also. Prabhupada said, you can just say Prabhupada said, and then you can misapply it also. So you should know how to apply, where to apply, how not to misinterpret. So that requires training. You have to be trained under the guidance of spiritual master. And training means here it is very clearly explained. Atasri Krishna namadi na bhavet grahyam indriyai sevon mukehi jigvado swayam eva spuratyadaha. So this is the whole point, that unmukha, sevon mukha, one has to become this seva bhav. Has to be instilled. So that is the training we get from day one when we join the Hare Krishna movement. If somebody comes with the idea that now I will completely relax, I came to a spiritual organization, now I will relax your mind. Yes, you relax your mind, 24 hours engaged in service. 24 hours. Sleeping is also a service. Honoring prasadam is a service. Everything is service for Krishna. That's what Srila Prabhupada, we just read the quote. So when one is trained like this, he is completely jnana vijnana triptatma. He is completely satisfied. Such a person can see things in proper perspective. Otherwise, you are just Maya has a big bag of thousands of tricks. She will just throw one trick and we are finished. We are just gone. We are just gone with the wind. So if we can develop this attitude of Saimon Mukha, so that is what the spiritual master is training us. He is putting us under the guidance of his senior disciples, and then the whole thing is we are being trained. So we have a total program, full balanced program. We wake up in the morning, we glorify the Lord, we chant prayers, we chant japa on our beads, and then we engage in various services. Everybody has got throughout the day various sevas. We hear the Bhagavatam class in the morning, then we honor prasadam. We see whole day is completely scheduled. There is no question of now, at any time you know what we are doing. That's why the regulation is so important. Now what I will do, maybe I can go for darshan, or maybe I can take some 2 hours more rest. No, your whole day is scheduled. That's the whole thing in ashram. That whole schedule is fixed for you. Now is the time for prasadam, now is the time for seva, now is the time for studies, now is the time for arati, now is the time to go out for preaching. So this is the whole, when you have the whole program scheduled, then you will not be in mental platform. So not only in brahmacharya ashram, even wherever we are, we have to mold our life like this. We should have a clear schedule for us, so that any time we get, learn a shloka, call someone, preach to him, read from Prabhupada's book, never allow the mind to wander around. So here, this whole seva bhav is being, Prabhupada is pointing out, that by that, when we simultaneously read and hear and engage in service, then one gets the realization. By that one is realized, and then one will be able to see things in proper perspective. So that is one of the important points Srila Prabhupada is conveying here. Otherwise, we see so many scholars, they can speak, they can give eloquent speech, they can do even more analysis. They may, there is one professor, I guess, he can tell the entire Gaudiya Vaishnava history in a chronological way. Perfectly he can just say. But he doesn't believe Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna. What is the point? It's all just some mundane reading, that's all. Because they don't come forward, they don't take part in service, they don't appreciate this process of devotional service. So this seva bhav is so important, that should be understood. And we can see, for a person who has realized, who is in complete transcendental knowledge, he can see things in proper perspective. I think, if you remember, if you read the Leelamrita also, I think some letters also, Srila Prabhupada, when he went to US, Prabhupada, he commented on, it was actually a shock for Srila Prabhupada when he saw that in West, after you clear your stomach, what they do is their system of cleaning is different. They have tissue paper and then they clear with they clean with tissue paper. When Prabhupada saw this, he wrote in fact to some people in India that they do not even know the basic cleanliness. So they clean with tissue paper like that. Prabhupada was making a mockery. But then, Srila Prabhupada, you remember this another famous incident we might have read in Leelamrita. Prabhupada said there was one drunkard, a fellow was so drunk, he came I think it was in the 2nd Avenue. He came, he was, sometimes very angry, but then after I think he was in the program, before leaving the program, he left 2 tissue paper packets, and Prabhupada said that his devotional service has begun. See, Prabhupada could see things, this is vision, so that's what it is. So, Jnana Vijnana Triptatma, he could see things in proper perspective because he is being in touch with the Supreme Lord. They could see it with right perspective. So that is what Srila Prabhupada is pointing out here. Let's continue with the purport. The Bhagavad Gita is the science of Krishna consciousness. No one can become Krishna conscious simply by mundane scholarship. One must be fortunate enough to associate with a person who is in pure consciousness. So further he says that by engaging in the service and practicing, one will gain transcendental knowledge. And further he points out, he is transcendental. Who is transcendental? Such a devotee whose self-control is transcendental because he has nothing to do with mundane scholarship. See, he is pointing out. For him, mundane scholarship and mental speculation, which may be as good as gold to others, are of no greater value than pebbles or stones. So this is the whole point. So one may be very well read, one may know so many things, but this attitude of we are eternal servant of Krishna, goal of life is to please Krishna. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one does not have this conviction and one doesn't engage in the service, that doesn't make any sense. So it's Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam. That's it. So by the association of pure devotees, by engaging in the service of the Lord, one comes to this realization. So this is the point being made. Okay, now let's go to text 9. Suran mitraryudasina madhyastadveshya bandhushu sadhushvapi cha papeshu samabuddhir vishishyate. A person is considered still further advanced when he regards honest well-wishers, affectionate benefactors, the neutral, mediators, the envious, friends and enemies, the pious and the sinners, all with an equal mind. Oh my God, how can we do it, Even if someone let's say we have a little misunderstanding with someone, we don't talk to him for 1 month or 2 months, or we want to completely cut him off from our list, okay, or block his phone number, whatever. But here we see the qualities. Krishna is pointing out several words here. He says that Suhuran, Mitra, Madhyastha, Dveshya, even if somebody is apparently acts as an enemy, he sees everyone with Samabuddhi. Now we can see this kind of discourse. So this is what now we can understand Prashantasya. In previous verses we mentioned Prashantasya. Prahlad Maharaj was in that state. He was able to, how can we imagine 5-year-old boy can we imagine a 5-year-old boy, forget about Prahlad Maharaj, take any 5-year-old boy, mind itself is in such a state that he cannot be in one place for forget about even 30 seconds. 5 seconds he cannot sit in one place. He always wants to do something. Just he wants to move, run, make so much noise. Those who are having children, they know. When the child is even small, they know how they are so restless. But a 5-year-old boy like Prahlad Maharaj, because he was in that state of Prashantasya, his senses and mind completely controlled, he was directly hearing instructions from the Supreme Lord. So when all these asuras, all these fellows, they were trying to send snakes, throw him from the mountain, completely shanti. So that's the description here. So that is what it is. And we can see, we can take another example from Bhagavatam. We can take the example of Ambarish Maharaj. Durvasa, created such a demon who could just burn him off. But Ambarish Maharaj was totally absorbed, completely absorbed in Krishna's service. And you can see, I don't remember the verse, it's a nice verse. He says, when Durvasa Muni glorifies Ambarish Maharaj, he specifically says that, he says that, aho mahantam, something like that, the verse goes. He says, oh indeed, what a great day, what a glorification. This Ambarish I actually, he said, I was like a great enemy to him. I wanted to kill him. But rather he offers prayers to Sudarshana, and then he just requests the Lord that, please forgive, even he doesn't even say forgive. No, he is a great Brahmana, like that he is glorifying him. He says that indeed such a great person, what a great person I have met. My quality was so low, but he is such a great personality, he wanted to be my well-wisher. So that is what is being explained. So when one person comes to the great standard, high level of consciousness, he is able to see everyone with that equal vision. At the same time, we can see Srila Prabhupada also was so merciful, wanted to save the lives of the people. That incident also we before discussed, when one fellow in Mayapur was stealing, was taking away money. Prabhupada was first time merciful, gave chance. I think 2 times he was given, and 3rd time again when he said call the police. Prabhupada said, Srila Prabhupada was so merciful. He wanted to save the lives of so many people. He had great pain when he saw people struggling and suffering in this material world. So this is a great quality, and he is a real well-wisher. And Prabhupada was so strong, speaking powerful words. He said, rascals, Mura, I will kick them on your face with the boots. It's all his expressions of compassion. So that is actually not this so many so-called Babajis and so-called gurus who smile so nicely, speak very soft words, polite words, words of compassion. But actually they themselves are going towards hell, and they are taking their followers also to hell, because they are speaking something which Krishna is not speaking. They are just misdirecting them by not engaging them in Krishna's service. But we can see these great qualities with this of the Yoga Ruda person who has attained this level of dictation with Paramatma. He is hearing the dictation of Paramatma and is acting accordingly. Okay, let's go to the next verse. Now again a series of verses to begin with, how the yogi has to sit and what should be his qualities explained here. Text 10. Yogi yunjita satatam atmanam rahasi stitah ekakiyata chittatma nirashir aparigraha. A transcendentalist should always engage his body, mind and self in relationship with the Supreme. He should live alone in a secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. He should be free from desires and feelings of possessiveness. Again, some more qualities explained how we should be. He should be in a secluded place. So let's every one of us pack ourselves. Let's go to, we saw some caves near Badrinath. We can go and then stay there, because that's what the verse says. And one should also be free from all possessiveness. That is also nirashihi aparigraha. See, we are seeing this again and again. Krishna is speaking, nirashi. How many shlokas we heard? Nirashihi aparigraha. Again, we will hear this when Krishna speaks about what is proper knowledge. Krishna speaks about this in 13th chapter, verses 8 to 12. Again, same things he will explain. So, why it's being repeated? Because our very nature in this material world is to always possess something, always we think of everything, we being the proprietors, and always we are overflowing with so many different desires. So Krishna is reminding us that these things will bind you. So better you engage in my service. Okay, Srila Prabhupada here in this purport is pointing out about how by directly engaging in the Lord's service, one is taking an easy path. So Srila Prabhupada is pointing out, but those who are attached to the impersonal Brahman or the localized super soul are also partially Krishna conscious, because the impersonal Brahman is the spiritual ray of Krishna and the super soul is the all-pervading partial expansion of Krishna. Thus the impersonalist and the meditator are also indirectly Krishna conscious. The directly Krishna conscious person is the topmost transcendentalist, because such a devotee knows what is meant by Brahman and Paramatma. So this is another interesting thing. So devotee knows the other 2 levels also. What is Brahman? What is Paramatma? Others may not know about the Bhagavan feature at all. His knowledge of the absolute truth is perfect, whereas the impersonalist and the meditative yogi are imperfectly Krishna conscious. So, as Srila Prabhupada introduced, they are Krishna conscious but in an indirect way, because the Paramatma's expansion of the Bhagavan and the light that is coming, which is an impersonal Jyoti, that is a reflection from the Lord's transcendental body. Okay, again Srila Prabhupada is pointing out here the goal of the study of scriptures, one to attain samadhi, one should always think of Krishna and not forget him even for a moment. What Srila Prabhupada is pointing out here. Smartavyam satatam Vishnu, vismartavyam na jatujit. This is the goal of all the practice, all the yoga practice. In fact, the whole, as we discussed before, all the study should finally lead us to this situation. So concentration of the mind on the Supreme is called samadhi. So now, why this idea of seclusion is spoken here? Seclusion and be nirashihi, aparigraha. Because all these things will distract our process of Krishna consciousness. So we have to be completely focused. Even in our practice of devotion also, sometimes we are very focused. We don't want to get digressed. We want to be really do it so nicely for Krishna. That's why when the cook is cooking, if you don't then go and talk to him something, the cook will even curse us. Better you be away from it. Similarly with those who are doing puja also, completely mind focused, totally how we can do it so nicely for Krishna. So that is why all these regulations, these restrictions and regulations are given. Now Srila Prabhupada is pointing out, all these perfections and precautions are perfectly executed when one is directly in Krishna consciousness, because direct Krishna consciousness means self-abnegation, wherein there is very little chance for material possessiveness. So both the things are reconciled here. Prabhupada is speaking about how seclusion is there, but for us seclusion means association with the devotees. In that way we are secluded from the bad effects of Maya, because always mind is engaged in Krishna conscious thoughts. And then what is the self-abnegation that we are doing? We are using everything in Krishna's service. That's why again Srila Prabhupada is quoting these two verses from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, understanding the proper idea of renunciation and engaging everything properly in Krishna's service. Okay, so I just stop here. If you have any questions or comments, are welcome, or any realizations or any thoughts. So we will continue with other verses from tomorrow. Any thoughts, any other comments, any other points? Yes, bro.
For all who is unified in the absolute system, or is said to be the means. For all who is already elevated in yoga, cessation of all materialized activity is said.
Okay, I got your question. The question is, what is this person, the Eightfold Yoga system, a person who is not fully purified himself, can he take up? So that is why it is given. First thing is Yama Niyama. You have to follow Yama and Niyama, and then Asana is there. Then Pranayama is there. So with all these things, one has to first of all purify. If he is not able to, cross this stage itself, he has to again go through this process. And so Pratyahara and then Dharana. It will be very difficult to go to the stage of Pratyahara and Dharana unless he follows Yama and Niyama and then Asana and then Pranayama. These 4 stages. One has to really, in fact, for someone one is purified thoroughly, when he can take up this process. Otherwise it's very difficult. Even if somebody tries, then if the agitation is there, then he has to further again purify. As Krishna is explaining, acting for the sake of dharma. So the whole process of this whole karma process is there. So in that state he should again purify, then again he can come and then try this process of the Ashtanga Yoga system. Otherwise, if you directly try to, without sufficient purification, you try, you will not be able to succeed. There will be a miserable fall down. That has to be understood. Yes? Yes. Yeah, you may be terribly, you may fall down, you may engage in sense perception. Yes, that is there. Yes. This chapter 6, Arjuna is going to ask a question. What is going to happen to a person? Krishna, you have given this own this Ashtanga Yoga process, but I have a doubt. If someone is not able to follow perfectly and he miserably falls down, he will neither be able to have material enjoyment because already he has taken the process of renunciation and control his senses and mind. He will neither be able to enjoy the material senses, or to be, not be able to go to Swarga also, and nor will be attain the self-realization. What will be his state? So you please be stay tuned. We will discuss this more in detail when we discuss those verses. The point is that fall down is there in the mechanical process and also in the process of Bhakti Yoga. But what are the advantages? Even if a person falls in Bhakti Yoga, what is this situation? And what is the situation of a person who is taking other process? What is the situation? In detail we will discuss when those verses are going to unfold. So I will put it in parking for now. Hare Krishna. Okay, last question. We are running short of time.
Last question means what is the means? What is the means? Is it for the Ashtanga Yoga procedure or the Karma Yoga can be to?
That's what very much in the beginning we discussed. A person who has practiced by the process of karma, he has come to a level of jnana, and that person will take up this process of eightfold yoga system. That is what is being mentioned here. And even if someone who has not attained the perfection, he has to go through the initial stages of this. It's a very tedious process. One has to get purified, and by that purification one has to elevate himself. But if he is not sufficiently, his mind is very disturbed, he is not able to sit, he has to go back, he has to perform his work and then become detached, and all those systems are there. So Krishna is hinting all these things. So Krishna is saying, so these are all the indirect process. Better you take to the direct process of Krishna consciousness. That will be further discussed. So this is the means of the eightfold yoga system Krishna is speaking about. So we'll stop here and we will continue tomorrow. Thank you very much. We will discuss after the class. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Bhagavad Gita as it is ki jai. Hare Krishna.